Welcome to GoSimcha, the podcast that takes you on an in-depth approach to the Jewish music, entertainment, and simcha world. Now, here's your host, Zisha Littman. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another wonderful week of GoSimcha, the podcast. It is absolutely super duper exciting that we're kicking off season 3, this time in video form. Everyone's sitting around not really doing much, so you might as well sit and watch a nice video of me talking to some of my illustrious guests. This week, we're taking a trip down to Florida to sit with a very cool guy who happens to travel around many different places, giving shiurim, singing songs, and just spreading the word of Torah to wherever he may go. We're sitting down with Rabbi Ruvi, who is not only a rabbi and a shliach down in Florida, but he is also the singer and writer and creator of Storm the World project and his most recent single that just came out as well. So, Rabbi, pleasure to sit down with you. I hope everything's doing wonderful out there in Florida. I'm here in Israel. We're still trying to open things up and catch up with the world, but pleasure to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to spend some time with you and your listeners. And this is one of the upsides of this whole craziness, is the technology is really a gift from Hashem, enabling us to be able to communicate like this and, to transcend the walls that would otherwise separate. We can now transcend that and communicate, and that's a great, great gift.
Exactly. Now, is that the reason why you decided to name your latest single "The Gift"?
It was actually released. It was released to coincide with what's going on. So really, the content of the song is appreciating every breath and everything that we have in life as a gift. And it's been sitting around for a while, but I decided to get back with Yossi Green and excuse me. You don't have to get your wipes out. This is also the other upside of being virtual. You don't have to worry about putting on your mask.
I was going to put my mask on for this, but no need unless it travels through the.
So it was a song that was written a while back, and we thought about putting it into the album. We decided to leave it out. When all of this broke, I thought that the message of the song is really, really appropriate for what's happening in the world today. The fact that everything that we have is a gift and not to be taken for granted. And now that our lives have been turned upside down in the way that they have, I think people all over have a much greater appreciation for the things that we used to take for granted. So the message of the song is definitely very, very timely.
No, for sure. So before we get into more about your music, what's your story overall? Like, what's your story? How'd you get involved in music? How'd you get involved in shluchus? What's your story? Because you have a very interesting combination there. Like you're a shliach down in Florida, and you also travel around with your music. And I listened to some of your songs. I listened to a lot of your music. I went through your album, just to go through it, just to hear your sound. And I love it. And I have to say, I find it very funny that the Lubavitchers are always good with the English songs. A lot of these other guys, I don't know what it is. The Lubavitchers are always good with the English songs. It just sounds good. And I don't know. But what's your story?
Well, in brief, I grew up in Melbourne, Australia.
I never would have guessed.
In the land down under. And I grew up in a very musical family. My mother is a professional singer and sings or sang before, audiences, women-only audiences. She toured extensively. And my grandparents were both very musical and had a great uncle. He was probably the biggest childhood influence on me musically. His name was Rabbi Shmuel Betzadel Altois. And he recorded 2 albums at the behest of the Rebbe. 2 albums that are Nigunim from Nikolaev, which is where he came from. And that was the city of the Rebbe's birthplace. The Rebbe's early years were spent in Nikolaev. And he had the most melodic, not only voice, but ear. And he was an amazing bal tefillah, and we spent a lot of Shabbosim together. and he gave me a tremendous appreciation for the flavor of music. So he's a very big influence. And so I've been, singing for as long as I can remember. My mother says that she could always tell what kind of mood I was in by whether I was singing or not. If I was singing, I was in a good mood. So I'd like to think I spent most of my childhood singing, but I can't verify that. And I performed a lot in choirs in growing up as a kid in Melbourne. So the highlights, there used to be a very big concert called the Australian Hasidic Song Festival, and I performed as a soloist there. I think I also performed once opening up for Mordechai Ben David. He came to Melbourne, and the choir opened up for him. And so that's sort of, if you want to talk about a musical career or performance, that's started really when I was a child. And then when I was a teenager, I started writing my songwriting career, if you will, started in camps. I sort of became the go-to guy. I ended up writing like color war songs for both teams. So I couldn't lose. I couldn't lose either way. So that's where the flair for, songwriting started. And, music is just occupies a very, very deep part of my soul. And, when it does, anything that occupies a really deep part of your soul, you generally feel almost compelled to want to share, or at least to express. Hopefully what you feel you want to express is something that people want to have shared with them, and you have something that resonates with people. So that's sort of the genesis of, I guess, my career in music.
Wow. That's amazing. So it really came from back when you were a child all the way up until now, and has that tremendous influence on you to this day. That's really cool. And I can tell by your songs that you're a writer. I'm also a musician myself. I play 5 different instruments. I used to write music, but I don't have the time for it now. But I could tell by the compositions, I could tell by the songs that you wrote them yourself, that they were not farmed out to somebody else to write them. And I could tell that they came straight from the heart. And I think that's very, very amazing, to that type of talent, to be able to write and continue to write. It shows that spark of creativity within you. And like I said, like I was going through I generally do this before we have a guest on the show. I go through all their stuff just to have a listen again if it's something I haven't heard in a while. And I really liked your sound. I found that your sound, like you had a variety of different types of music on your albums. And I think that's kind of reflecting upon the theme of your site, the theme of who you are, storming the world, is that you stop me if I'm wrong, but like you had so many different sounds passing through there. It's ki'ilu, like you're storming the world, going through different places.
I did not think of it that way, but I like your spin on it. I think part of the different sounds of the music owes itself to collaborating with different composers.
Right.
So a few of the songs written by Yossi Green.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were written by Chana Lefelik, who has her own music career, living in Israel.
Yeah, she's my neighbor.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So this project really started as a collaboration with her, some of the original songs, and then it sort of evolved. And then about half the songs were written by Benzi Marcus, of course, as of Eighth Day, Feynman, who produced the album. I mean, any artist tries to produce an album. When you have 10 songs in an album, every artist tries to mix it up a little bit, different genres. Obviously, you have some are ballads and some are, with more rhythmic, but you try to mix up, the sound. It's, I guess, easier when you have different composers.
Right. It's funny that you said that Benzi had produced a bunch of the tracks. I can tell which ones were his because there's some of them have that sound, that they have a very distinct sound to them. Eighth Day has a very distinct sound to them. And it's kind of like folky, kind of like, it's a little bit like folky poppy, but like it's very distinctive. And I could tell which songs that they produced. And it's cool. I have a very good ear for these things.
Uh-huh.
And it's cool, But like, Big Adol, what was Storm the World? What's the whole story behind Storm the World?
So the story is that I started writing these songs without any real goal or objective in terms of recording them and performing them. It started as purely a catharsis for myself, and it was shortly after the passing of the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, in 1994, and it was an extraordinarily painful and difficult time, not only for myself, obviously, but for Chassidim and for Jews, for the world Jewry. And one of the ways that I coped, if you will, a coping mechanism was to write songs. Some of those early songs are not part of the album; they're just way too raw, and just expressing the raw emotions of the moment. One of those songs made it into the album. That's The Last Time You Waved Goodbye. It's a beautiful, beautiful ballad written by Yossi Green. So I just started to write it. And then once I started writing these very deeply emotional songs, it started to evolve into more thematic songs. And before, thematic meaning themes that are related either to the Rebbe's lifetime and life lessons we can learn from him or from his teachings. So before I knew it, I had 6 or 7 or 8 songs. And when I say songs, I'm really didn't write the music. Right. I did, you can't, when you write lyrics, as you know, you have to have an idea of what you're structuring and what it's going to sound like. And then you can sit and you can collaborate with a composer.
Right.
So to that extent, I knew what I was looking for. But I had no commercial aspirations. And, but, soon enough, I had 7 or 8 songs. And actually, at the time, I was living in Miami, across the street from Hannah Felig. And I was very friendly with her father, and I got to know her. She was an aspiring composer, a singer, a songwriter. And so we started I said, you know what, I've got lyrics and I've got ideas of songs sitting, maybe you want to take a look at it. So she actually wrote 4 or 5 or maybe even 6 compositions. But then it still sat. I didn't have the wherewithal yet or the vision to really put it out there. Then I recorded it, just a few demos, and started playing them for people, and everyone was like, you got to get this out there. And so I had a vision. Okay, I have to produce a CD. But the other challenge is, first of all, I had about 6 or 7 songs. I needed 10. But the biggest challenge was funding the project.
Right.
I'm a shliach, and I spent a good part of my time fundraising just to cover the projects and the operating budget of Chabad. Going out there and raising more funds for an album was just very daunting for me for the longest time, because covering the budget was enough of a challenge.
Right.
But then, I have a lot of family ties with Bensy Marcus and the Friedman family, and so we'd spoken about it over the years, and he was always felt like it should get out there, but it just sort of festered. And then about 3, 4 years ago, I was at a wedding in LA. Bensy was playing the wedding, and he said to me, "Listen, Ruvi, we got to do this album. We got to get it out there. We got to do this." And I decided right then and there, that's it. I'm making the achlata, making the resolution. It's a wedding I wasn't supposed to be at. I was stuck in Australia. Long story. It was just total hashgacha pratis, divine providence. I ended up at this wedding and said, okay, that's it. And then literally over the next year and a half, I went around raising sponsorships, getting each song sponsored by another person, and another dedication, and it was a very challenging and tedious process, but thank God I was able to find um, enough people to sponsor the album.
That's
And then,
amazing.
a bunch of trips out to LA and, recording and, producing with Benzi. And that's how the album, came to be.
So you truly stormed the world there. Like you truly stormed the world.
The title "Storm the World" is based on a catchphrase that the Rebbe would often say, which is
Right.
"Mitashturim." I mean, when the Rebbe was launching something, or the Rebbe wanted
Yep.
to get everybody galvanized, it's got to be. You got to storm the world. You can't be passive. You got to
Right. You
make
have
it
to.
happen.
You
You
have
got
to
to
go. You have to have Brent. You have to have. You have to go
right.
with it. And yeah, no.
Like full system. You got to go out there. We got a message, and we got to bring it. We got to storm the world. We got to shake up the world. So that's where the title of the album came from. And then out of that, I started to perform all over the country, all over in Australia, in many different places, where typically it was hosted by a local Chabad who would host an evening, a musical tribute to the life and teachings of the Rebbe. And so, thank
Nice.
God, toured many cities by now.
So I was going to ask you, how did all this, like, I guess your musical career and like traveling around and performing, how did that affect your duties as the shliach down there? Like, how
Well,
did?
it's challenging, and travel is not as glamorous as it seems. Not glamorous at all. It's difficult. So I cut back. I used to travel. I used to make myself available for weekends where I'd speak on Shabbos, Friday night Shabbos, and then do a concert Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos. I cut that out because I need to be here Shabbos servicing my community, and I can leave maybe a few Shabbos in a year. That ends up happening anyway between a family Simcha. So I had to cut back on that. Otherwise, I try to, like everybody else, try to create tours. And a lot of those tours, because the evening is centered around the life of the Rebbe, so there's it's like seasonal, and the
Right.
heavy season for that is early summer around
Yep.
the Rebbe's Gartzeit, Gimel Tammuz, before Yudalef Nissen, and also Yud Shvat, the winter
Right.
season. So I try to make basically three tours a year and pack in as many cities as possible.
Right. How when you started becoming more out there in the music scene, how receptive was your community about that? Did they know about this? Did your congregants know that you were this hidden music star?
um, music and me have never been very hidden. I mean, first of all, obviously I daven a lot. Singing has always been a very big part of my shlichus, whether it's around the Shabbos table or whether it's at the Hanukkah events and so on. So, that's never been a hidden part of myself. It's been a very frontal part of myself. Obviously, they're excited that their rabbi travels and has recorded an album, and that's if it helps the organization, then so be it.
Right. That's great. Now, who are some of the most notable people you've performed with, and some of the most notable experiences you've had throughout this journey?
Well, talking about myself and music, and here as my Chabad organization, sort of dovetails with the answer to the question you just put forward. Who are the most notable people that I've performed with? I've had Baruch Hashem the schus to perform with what I call the big three, MBD and Yaakov Shweki and Avram Fried. All of them. I performed with MBD and Avram Fried before on other occasions in New York. But I brought each one of them to do a concert for Chabad here. Not far from Chabad House is a beautiful world-class amphitheater, amazing venue. And so I always dreamt of bringing these performers, and these are big events and big undertakings, but they were just incredible. And so I had the opportunity to perform with all of them.
That's so cool. The big three. I like that. I like that. The big three.
You won't tell that to Benny Friedman and Mordechai Shapiro, but they've got seniority on them.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I had Alvin Fried on my show. He was fun. Him and I had a blast together. But so you said you traveled around to different cities. What were some of the most notable locations you've been to, and what were the reactions of people when you start? Because you said your music is very themed and centered around the life and teachings of the Rebbe, and it's amazing. It's good that you can infuse that. You can infuse those Torahs, those amazing Torahs, into your music. So so when you travel to these cities, what was one of the more interesting places you ever been to?
I've been to places large and small. I'll just think to my last tour. I did a concert in Sacramento, California, and it was actually a combination of a bunch of Chabad houses. I think like 10 Chabad houses in Sacramento, around the Northern California area, and it was a beautiful event. He actually live streamed it on Facebook Live, which he told me after the fact. That's what was incredible was that you had people from about 5 or maybe even 10 communities there, and before the concert started, representatives of each community got up and spoke, and just the about their connection to Chabad and to the Rebbe, and there were just some beautiful stories. One, a Reform rabbi got up, former Reform rabbi, who was formerly a Reform rabbi of a large congregation in Northern California. Today he's a full-fledged, Chabadnik, and it was just beautiful to see that. I mean, I'll tell you this. I mean, I've been to places, from the most unique places. I mean, the place like Santa Fe, New Mexico is a very different and unique kind of place. But I'll tell you this, one of the songs is called Reminded, and it's about the mitzvah campaigns and how one mitzvah can have a transformative effect on a person's life, right? Just being stopped on the street and wrapped with tefillin, and that can be a life-changing event. In 3 different cities. I remember that one was Teaneck, one was in Brooklyn Heights, and in the third place, I can't remember right now, in 3 different cities. Somebody came up to me after the concert and said, that song Reminded about the transformative effect of one mitzvah? It's to me, that's my story. And each one of them told how they were walking in the streets of New York City and were brought onto a mitzvah tank and put on film for the first time, either in their lives or many years.
Wow.
And how they completely changed the direction of their life. 2 of them are the presidents of their Chabads now. And so that was incredible to hear that. And I realized, and they realized, I said, little does the guy know, who schlepped me onto the mitzvah tank,
right,
how life-changing and transformative that one mitzvah was.
Well, that mitzvahs, it's a lot like music. Like music has that power to have tremendous hashpah on people, and it can really take you from one place and elevate you to the next. And the fact that your music, like I said before, is combined with these teachings and these Torahs, it really helps take it to the next level, and it can really define what's going on. And I always found that very interesting. That's why I always like the Rebbe's Torahs, is that because it's always defining the situation of what's going on, no matter what's going on in the world. And
music also gives people the space to be able to see themselves in a story.
Right.
Because as the Alter Rebbe said, music is the pen of the soul. So if music is touching somebody, the pores of their neshama are opening up, and they see themselves in that story. And I can see, you can see the reactions of crowds when you're singing a certain song or sharing a certain story, and then the feedback that you get. It's very humbling to be, able to share something that resonates with people in such a deep way.
No, for sure, and that's why music is like super powerful. And when you infuse music with the right things, it can really be a spark that elevates to the next level. And that's
Yeah.
always my question I ask people on the show is, with Jewish music nowadays, what do you think of Jewish music nowadays, where they're injecting all these different outside sources and other things like that into the music? I get a
Yeah.
lot of interesting responses, so I figured I'd ask you.
Um, Jewish music has always been influenced by the the contemporary sound that surrounds it. Um, so
Right.
if you think of, if you think of nigunim, of Chasidut nigunim, there's a certain flavor of Russian Chasidut nigunim. There's a flavor of Polish, Hungarian,
Right.
Romanian, Lithuanian. We are not we're not immune to the society and the culture that surrounds us. It's
Right.
all a question of how it's co-opted, um, and how it's channeled, and how it's utilized. And every artist has to ask himself, okay, where do I want this song to take the listener? And if my objective is just to get millions of views on YouTube, which halavai, we should get that, but just to create something that's going to be a commercial hit. I mean, that's not the objective of Jewish music. The
Right.
objective of Jewish music is to move a person, open up a person's neshama, and take them to a higher, purer, more transcendent place. And I think if an artist is honest in asking himself before he produces a song, if that's his stated goal, that's his stated objective, then I think it'll come through in the sound and the production of the song. But the reality is that because if you want a song to be heard and to be listened to,
Right.
especially by the youth, the sound to some extent has to be a sound that they're used to hearing. Otherwise, they're just going to tune out. So the challenge is always to balance, the integrity of what you want to express,
Right.
packaged in a way that's going to be palatable to the listener.
No, well said. It's funny because my guest last week said something very similar, and it's true. Our music it's not, our music isn't really a chiddush. We've always had it from different cultures, from different places. It's just a matter of what we're injecting into that music. As he put it last week, the nigunim, the Chassidish nigunim, their marches and waltzes from the old country. The Rebbe is injecting his kedusha into that, and his kavanas into that music, and that's what makes it Jewish.
I think I think probably the best answer to this question is the answer that the Rebbe gave to Yossi Piamenta
Mm,
when he became a Baal Tshuva, and all he knew was, I mean, his career was rock music, and he's this amazing rock guitarist, and he was at a crossroads. He didn't know what he should do with his career musically, knowing that his genre was not exactly Jewish. And the Rebbe told him that he needs to channel that genre of music of rock and roll, and like you said, and infuse it with kedusha, utilize it as a vehicle to spread a holy and positive message. And the Rebbe said, particularly because the sound of his music is what youth are listening to. So we don't want to bury the electric guitar. We want to take it and we want to utilize it now as a vehicle for kedusha. So I always say Yossi Piamenta is the one who brought the electric guitar to Jewish music. Until Yossi Piamenta, all you heard was basically trumpets,
hmm
horns, a little bit of keyboard. You did not hear the electric guitar.
Right.
Yossi Piamenta brought the rock sound to, if you will. But if you listen to Piamenta's music,
Yes.
it's soulful and it's powerful and it's evocative.
hmm
So he really lived up to. And I heard him play live in front of the Rebbe. By the way, there was a few occasions
Wow.
when the Rebbe used to distribute wine after Yom Tov for many hours, and we would stand there for many hours at the bleachers and sing. On a couple of those occasions, Yossi Piamenta was playing right there with his electric guitar. I mean, he wasn't overpowering, but he was playing. So he used
Wow.
to advertise. He used to advertise in one of his ads. We played for the Rebbe. We could play for you too. You know, uh, he played at Lag Bama parades and so on. So I would say the Rebbe, as always, had a very progressive and inclusive worldview, and didn't look to destroy what's out there, but to harness it and utilize it for kedusha and for holiness.
That's great. What you said about Piamenta and how he was at like the crossroads with his music. It reminds me when I had Tali S on my show, the late Moshe S's son, and he said that his father in one of Moshe S's songs, he makes a joke about that. He says in one of his songs, you know, like my music can be kosher. What do you mean? And he's like, yeah, of course, your music can be kosher. You just have to do it right. You have
Yeah,
to.
right.
And
So he brought the folk sound of the 60s and the 70s into Jewish music, and Piamenta brought the rock sound.
right, everybody brings their own unique sound and ability to the table, and it kind of evolves into what we have today. And it's funny, people probably don't realize it as much that these people were the pioneers of all this, and we just kind of take it for granted. But
Well, I would say Piamenta took it to another level. I would say the most, in my opinion, in my lifetime, the most transitional pioneer, I would say, was Mordechai ben David, because up until him, you had Shlomo Kalbach and the rabbi's sons, and they
right,
were all singing very, very much, very traditional
yeah,
sounding music. MBD was the first one to co-opt in the 70s his first album, like Hineni, I'd Rather Pray and Sing. I mean, he was already starting to incorporate more of the contemporary um,
right.
sound. And then, yeah, I think that, Piamenta took it like to the next level. Well,
That's really cool. That is really, really cool. Well, what else does the future hold for Rabbi Ruvi? What do we got in the works?
so what I'd really like to do musically at this point is I would like to record an album in Hebrew and work with Israeli composers to create an album that is message oriented, like the first album, Storm the World. Same thing in the sense of I'm not. My goal as a quote unquote musician is not so much career oriented as much as it is part of my shluchus, which is to um, be a purveyor of a message. I just happen to think that music is a very powerful vehicle
Right.
to, convey this message. So what I'd really like to do is to collaborate with some Israeli artists and create an album in Hebrew. And I hope to come to Israel and perform and build up some sort of base of recognition. And I've reached out to a couple of names in the Israeli music scene to talk a little bit about the vision for an album, and then which I held off doing for the same reason I procrastinated so long on my first album, which is the funding.
Right.
Um, but after a while, you start to get the itch, and, and it's hard to hold back. And I think that the kind of album that I put out, Storm the World, that type of messaging, I don't think is. I'm not hearing that in Israeli music so much. But I am hearing a lot in Israeli music. There's a whole new level of depth emerging out of the likes of Yishai Ribo and all these amazing lyrics and
Hmm.
conveying subtle messaging. What he calls an amazing composer. What's his name from Oshpizen, the Breslau guy.
Oh, yeah. Shuli Rand.
It's really around amazing. I mean, I don't. So, I think these guys have all brought a whole nother layer of depth. Music is not so pop as it is very conveying very Very message oriented. And Isha Kibo is a phenomenon that is, you're living in Israel, as you know, but he's also incredibly popular here in the States. So I'd like to produce an album that in Hebrew that is more, the sound is also more conducive for an Israeli listening experience. And then maybe do an English version of the same album at the same time and just do the lyrics in both Hebrew and English. But that's my goal, that's my dream, that's my vision for the future.
That's really cool. That's really cool. You know, I mentioned to you before, I find it very interesting that the Lubavitchers have a way with the multilingual music. Is it a thing? Like, because I notice your English songs, they sound good. They don't sound like, you know, cheesy and put together. You know what I mean? Like sometimes English songs and Hebrew songs not done properly sound like very like cheesy. But is it me or is it a Chabad thing?
I don't know. I'd say this. That Chabad Chasidus has tremendous depth and is very rich, as is the Rebbe's lifetime. So if you are creating lyrics that are based on ideas that are in Chabad Chasidus and ideas that relate to the Rebbe's lifetime, so you're already starting with something very meaningful and something deep and rich. It's just a matter of being able to express it, but the teichen is already there. It's just a matter of how you're packaging.
Right. Well, there you go. Well, Rabbi Ruvi, it was a pleasure having you on my show. I got to learn a lot about you, and I got to see more in depth about your music and insight to it, and I think it was really cool. And I wish you tremendous hatzlacha in everything you're doing, both on your shluchas and in your musical career, because it seems like you're doing pretty well at both of those. I mean, how long have you been on shluchas?
I've been on shluchas 30 years.
Oh, wow. So you started when I was born.
Just getting going. You know, I think by the time this is all over, we're going to be talking about, PC and AC. Before PC, actually, before Corona, and AC after Corona. So a whole new world.
A whole new world.
Very open to different ways of thinking and doing stuff. So I would say in many respects, we're just starting over.
Right. It must be crazy though, like to be someone who has a shul, has a congregation, and to just tell people, no, you can't come to shul. It must be absolutely insane.
You know, I was from the last ones to pull the trigger on closing the shul and to make that announcement was just surreal. You know, I think it's like the first time in Jewish history, I think, that shuls across the world are closed, that it's not because we are living under some tyrannical regime that is forcing it. The whole thing's pretty surreal. But the way I told people is we're just having a temporary closure right now. We're just going to find different ways to connect. And on the one hand, it's been very difficult in terms of not having davening, minyanim, and so on. On the other hand, I've seen a tremendous uptick in people participating in shiurim and classes. I give a class every morning, for example, on Facebook as an average viewership of over 1,000 people.
Wow!
Every single day, and that just is indicative of the fact that people are definitely looking to connect more spiritually right now. So we have to utilize this time to the max. This is Hashem's will for right now. So this is the way it's supposed to be. The way it is today is the way it's supposed to be. This is what Hashem wants.
Right.
And we have to make the most out of, the deck that we've been handed.
Yeah, makes sense, and it makes a lot of sense, and especially it's a good time to I think it was a very smart idea to put out your album now to get people to connect on that level as well.
Yeah, the single definitely, and the response has been tremendous, and people really feel that the message of seeing everything in life as a gift from Hashem, not to be taken for granted, is resonating now on a whole different level.
Truly, truly amazing. Well, this was a true gift to have you on my show. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing wonderful things from you in the future. And please, God, if you're ever in Israel, don't be shy to look me up. You're more than welcome to come down and hang out with us here. And I'd love to even come out to one of your shows.
I shall. It's a sham, and I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to vibrate with you a little bit. It's been a great pleasure.
My pleasure.
And we shall be in touch, Mitzvah Hashem.
If you would have told me we were gonna fabring, I would have brought my bottles of mashka over here. I usually have a bottle of tequila sitting on my desk.
Actually, I do tell people there's one thing that you cannot do virtually, and that's fabring. Fabring, you're still gonna have a little bit of mashka, but
exactly.
Okay. So
you can clink the glasses against the screen, against the camera, and make l'chaim altazay. You know, like what are you gonna do? Yeah. That's great. You know, I'm gonna go make l'chaim after this. After we finish the episode, I'm gonna go make l'chaim.
What time are you now? 9:15.
Listen, it's 5:00 somewhere.
Yeah.
This is great. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I wish you tremendous hatzlacha and stay in touch. Don't be a stranger out here. All the best, my friend. Now don't hang. You've just listened to another wonderful episode of GoSimcha the podcast. For more news, updates, and information on our next episode, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram at GoSimcha Live, and don't forget to check out the show notes and videos on www.gosimcha.com along with zeradio.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, Go Simcha!